All right, so I'm just making a video about my current drawing, which is right here. And it's in its final stages. As you can see, it's just 3 simple cells, actually pretty conservative, but I surrounded it with a border here and then another border here, which you can't really see yet, but once I ink it all in, it'll be much stronger. So actually, let me bring it up on my computer. So this is the template it's based on. Actually, this doesn't work very well. Let me see, because I can't show it. So this is what it looks like. So you see, although you can't really see the borders here, they're fairly weak, but it'll look like this. And you've got the Prudential Center in the background. You've got the basketball that these 2 guys are reaching for right here. And you got 2 people deciding where to go, way, way in the background. And so, yeah, that's really it. It's sort of deceptive. It looks like one scene that I chopped up into 3 parts, but these are actually based on 2 or 3 different photographs. I can't remember anymore. So, yeah, and now I'm just putting this grid over it. So I've put all my ruler markings down, and then I'll connect all these ruler markings to the other side. So maybe I could show you. I need a flat surface, so put a piece of paper down like this. And I will match this side up. I'll put the paper next to this, say this ruler marking, which is 2 above this sort of middle line. And then I'll put the other side on the same exact corresponding ruler marking. It's hard to do it with the camera. You really need 2 hands. But sort of like this. So I'll pair it up like this. I'll hold the paper down and then I'll just draw a line like that. And I do that for the whole paper. It takes forever. It hurts your back too because you have to lean over constantly to do it all. And it's very precise and there's so many of them. So anyway, there's that. That's my current drawing. Okay. So I also want to talk about one other thing, since it's Thanksgiving. Back at my parents' house, and woke up early, went to go get coffee, which actually I've quit drinking coffee to save money, but it's such a good way to wake up, you know, when I have a day off. Getting coffee right after waking up always really woke me up, you know, having to walk to the gas station or the coffee, you know, the Starbucks or whatever, immediately, and then coming back and drinking coffee immediately put me in the right mind to draw. So I do it every once in a while. But on the way there, I did something that I always do, which is recently, for the last few years or so. It sounds really silly, but I always imagine in my fantasy world, I'm always being interviewed by somebody. I'm always sort of pretending that I'm like a famous artist and somebody like a Zane Lowe or a who's that other guy who got caught up in the Me Too thing? Oh my God, what's that guy's name? I'm totally blanking on it, but that famous interviewer guy. Anyway, so I'm always imagining being interviewed. And like, how did you develop your craft? How did you get to where you are? And what is your advice for other artists and stuff like that? And I always end up, in this fantasy, I always end up saying the same things over and over. They're actually really boring interviews. And usually I'm imagining that I'm like a musician and I just created an album. I almost never, well, actually that's not true. I do imagine that I'm the visual artist that I am. But anyway, so I always end up saying the same things. And then it always turns to politics, and I'm answering questions about my political views. And when that happens, I'm always imagining that I'm sort of telling off all these crazy liberals, all the SJWs. And like I go on rants in this imaginary interview about how the SJWs over the last 3 years or so have destroyed the arts, have destroyed it with political correctness that has sort of taken over, invaded everything. And which is, I really do believe, all these artists these days are terrified of saying something inappropriate and then getting destroyed on Twitter, losing endorsements, being kicked from their label, all this stuff. So music and TV is incredibly, incredibly, incredibly bland. Like even, I've been like trying to figure out how am I going to get myself into exhibits. I haven't tried it yet because I'm a coward. I really need to I've been working on, the idea was I was going to work on a comic book as like / portfolio comic book, send that out. I've gotten about halfway through and for some reason I've stopped working on it. I need to get back on working on it and do something. But anyway, for a period of time I was going on websites like Artforum and stuff like that, trying to find out what the gallery scene is like, what artists do, which galleries would fit my particular art style. And and looking at, there's also all sorts of like artist grants you can apply for. And when you read these artist grants, they're almost like HR statements. Like the artwork we expect from you has to be about diversity, about marginalized people, blah, 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 blah. It almost reads like a PR statement. It's like, or an HR statement. When you get hired, it's like you have to sign this paperwork. I will respect, rules around race and gender and all that stuff. So political correctness and great art isn't made from that point of view. It's made from creating deep within your subconscious, from your id, from your balls, letting things spill out in complex, beautiful, twisted ways that isn't censored. You can't self-censor yourself when making artwork. Anyway, so this has been like a particularly strong hang-up that I've had, in that I'm always thinking about and so angry about. And a lot of it comes from just, what's happened since Donald Trump got elected. But another part of it comes from anger towards my parents, who are very ideologically liberal. And they aren't angry by this. I'd say they're on that side. They're on the political correctness side, which I feel is like really an enemy towards the arts. And so I'm hung up. And this morning on the way to the coffee shop, on the way to Starbucks, I go into the Starbucks. I'm not being mindful, so I'm in this fantasy land. I go into the Starbucks. I put sugar and milk into my coffee, and then I look up from the sugar and milk station and see a flyer. This is in Brookline, Massachusetts, very liberal area. I see a flyer for it's like an art. I'm not sure exactly what it is. It's like it's for an art group, I think for kids. And the poster is a picture of a superhero, and the title below it is like some sort of genderless pronoun thing, and it's something compassion. Like I don't think it's Mr. or Mrs. Compassion. It's just like something compassion or something. And the picture was of this superhero that was sort of genderless or raceless and was like very bland. It's everything Comicsgate has been talking about for the last few years, and is a political correctness piece of artwork. It wasn't designed from the subconscious. It wasn't designed from the id. There's nothing inspiring about it. I don't know what kid would look at that and be like, I'm inspired to join this group. And it sort of set me off on this hang up of mine all over again. So I'm walking back home from the Starbucks, and all I can imagine is being interviewed, I think by Zane Lowe, telling him what a great artist, how I became such a great artist, in sort of a fake humble way, always. And then going off about these SJWs. And then I get back home to my parents' house, and I put the drawing in front of me in my computer, and I'm still stuck in this mindset. I can't calm down. And then something beautiful happens. I'm preaching to Zane Lowe in my imagination how liberals have destroyed everything. And then all of a sudden, I correct myself, or I stop myself. And I say, because I start talking about Buddhism, which is also a huge part of my life now. Or has become. I mean, I start talking about the Buddhist philosophy, which is that everything's one and everything's interconnected, which is not just the Buddhist philosophy, but it's just straight up biology, and science. We all came from the earth. Everything we ate that makes up our brains, that makes up our bodies, came from the earth. The things we eat, the plants, the animals that ate those plants, all that came from the soil. The soil came from the rocks and minerals. When we die, our bodies, which are like, 80% water, something will evaporate into the sky. Our bodies will disintegrate back into the earth. Liberals and conservatives will both evaporate into the sky together, into the earth together. Those particles will all mix, and then will regrow, into something else, like a tree or a plant, and then those that tree and those plants will be eaten by something, and that thing will be eaten by something else, and then the process keeps on going and going. But it all came from the ground. We're all just, the earth. And so is everything else. So is this piece of paper. So is the chair I'm sitting on. So are the parts that make up my laptop. And it's just constantly just dissolving, regrowing, dissolving, regrowing, dissolving, regrowing, And then when you start to think about what is the earth is the universe, The earth is all that energy that happened that was created by the Big Bang. And so we're all just the universe. And we'll all be mixed together over and over. So anyway, I'm going to start to explain that in my imagination of Zane Lowe. And I say that that's really what I believe more than anything else. And I say that, so if I'm really being honest, what I really believe is that the world is sort of infinite. It couldn't be anything other than what it is. And I'm actually simplifying all of these arguments, and that they're probably much more complex than even I understand, and that they couldn't be any other way than what they are now. It's in Buddhism, or in just Chinese philosophy in general. I think it's called this is because that is, everything sort of follows each other. And so then I say to Zane Lowe, I say, so let's just stop for a moment and breathe. Which this never happens in my fantasies about being interviewed. I never follow this line of thought to the very end, where I realize I'm actually wrong in that where I start to unravel all these sort of the anger that I have and sort of entangled thoughts that come with all this baggage of where I grew up and what my parents think and what I'm seeing around me in the art world. So I get to a point where I'm just imagining, I'm telling Zane Lowe, let's just breathe, this is something I do more and more and more and more when I find myself starting to get wrapped up in my own thoughts or overly excited or amped up. I'll take a moment to take 10 breaths. And if I'm not able to get control of my mind at that point, I'll take another 10. So I tell Zane Lowe to breathe. Now I'm imagining that Zane Lowe and I are breathing together on camera. And then I realize, in the reality, I'm imagining Zane Lowe and I breathing, but I'm not breathing. So I need to be, in real life, I need to be breathing right now and get out of this fantasy world. Because I can't draw, I can't focus on anything. I'm still just too caught up and amped up. So I start to breathe in real life. And even then, I'm having a hard time getting back to this sort of state of emptiness, which you want to get to, where you're only focused on your breath and your breathing. You're supposed to focus on your breath from its beginning to its very end. Thich Nhat Hanh, who's a Vietnamese Buddhist monk, actually went to his monasteries all over the world, or it's called Plum Village is the sort of sect he founded, and they're not all over the world, but there are branches of it in the U.S. and in Vietnam and stuff like that. And there's one called Blue Cliff Monastery in New York, upstate New York, which I went to a few months ago. But anyway, so Thich Nhat Hanh, which I recommend, it's actually a really great experience. If you go for a couple of days, you spend time with the monks, you do walking meditation, like really put you in a place of mindfulness, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, Thich Nhat Hanh will use an analogy like, say pencil's your breath. You focus on it from the very beginning, and as you breathe in or breathe out, you focus on it to the very end. And you only focus on your breath. I start doing that. It's very difficult at first because I realize that this is an epiphany. And I'm like, I need to make a video about this. And so the first 20 breaths or so, intrusive thoughts about what I'm going to say in this video start going into my head. And what I did was, like, every time that happens, I'm going to reset to 1 because I count all my breaths up to 10 and then I restart at 1. So you take 1 in breath, you say 1 in your head, you take 1 out breath, you say 1, you take 1 in breath again, you say 2, you take 1 out breath, you say 2, you take 1 in breath, you say 3, you take 1 out breath, you say 3, all the way to 10, and then you restart. So every time having like an intrusive thought about that's not focusing on my breath, it's called dispersion. Your brain is getting dispersed. You're not focusing on the present moment. I restart. And I was successfully able to do that, really. It took a while. I had to take, I'd say, about 40 to 50 long breaths in that manner before I could really focus on nothing but my breath and sort of stop. And then I picked up the camera to talk about it. But, so anyway, I just thought I'd talk about that because it's had such a tremendous impact on my life. I can't really explain what is significant, discovering breathing, what a significant impact that's had. I have to drive into work every day in Boston, rush hour traffic. It was killing me, so stressful. Now I do breathing meditation while I'm driving. Huge impact. Knock on wood, but in case anything ever happens, but huge impact in calming me down. And now I drive slowly. I try to drive like the Buddha. You know what I'm saying? I walk like the Buddha, which just means I focus on my breath and my steps. And I try to do sitting meditation at least once a day. Never turns out like maybe I do it twice a week, but I have to do it a lot more because sitting meditation is amazing. If you wake up from, I don't know, wake up, so you come out of it and the world is so still, so calm and so still. And that carries, and if you do that regularly enough, it carries over into every other part of your day. You're just so much calmer. And then another amazing thing's happened from all that. And this is something that, because I just finished a giant book called Old Path, White Clouds, written by Thich Nhat Hanh. It's all about the Buddha's life. I mean, everything all these monks say is, when you calm your mind down through focusing on your breathing, what that leads to is ability to understand like the world that's going on around you, what's happening, understanding other people. So now that's actually happens to me. So I walk around now, because I have to walk around a lot for my job also. And instead of having I used to walk around with my headphones on and just tune out the whole world. Now I never listen to music. I never have my headphones in. And I walk around and I'm looking up. I'm not looking at the ground. Although I'm not perfect at this yet. But I'm trying to read people, get into their heads. And that leads to so much less of a feeling of isolation and anger and judgment. It's just like, I feel so much more connected, and I understand people, and I understand like, and when you understand people, you don't feel like people are against you all the time, which is what happens when you try to tune them out. So anyway, just talking about that. Now I'm gonna get back to my drawing. All right, and also, happy Thanksgiving. Try to focus on your breathing, man. Okay? If any time, just being back with my parents immediately sets me off and I start thinking about politics. All you gotta do is breathe. That's the key. That's the whole moral of this video. All right. Bye.